Well, Dragonfolk, it seems that we have a new Earth Runeblade in the midst for Commoner. Will Florian live up to the standards of Briar in the Commoner format, or is the Earth and Runeblade mix just a little too difficult for him to pull off? Here in this video, I'll go ahead and show you guys how I built my Florian deck for Commoner, and show you a little bit about how it works with some gameplay. Welcome on in, Dragonfolk. It is such a pleasure to see you all here today. It is another fine day here in the world of Commoner, and we have some new heroes to look over. So I know it's probably been a long time coming. I know a lot of people have already looked over lists and have made their own things, but I wanted to take this time to talk about the hero that I was personally very, very excited for, being Florian. Now, Florian is probably going to be my choice for Classic Constructed if I end up choosing them, but I wanted to see how they fared in Commoner. Luckily, as we know, with these young heroes, they only need to decompose 4 Earth cards as opposed to the Classic Constructed's 8. And that seems like it would be a really easy thing to do, right? But the problem I personally have here is that the deck doesn't really block very well. And it also is missing out a key card that everybody is going to want in an Earth deck, but unfortunately, the only format that it is unable to be played in is in Commoner, and that card is no other than Rootbound Carapace. Rootbound Carapace is the way, at least the most efficient way, to decompose within your deck in these low budget formats. And unfortunately, as you can see by that little blue circle down there at the bottom left, that's a rare, which means that we can't play it in Commoner. So my whole thing here is, what cards can we play that have this decomposed text? But first, for those of you who are not familiar with Florian, let's go ahead and check out exactly what the hero does and why decompose is so important to their game plan. So with Florian, you have the ability of, if you are, and I know it might be a little hard to read because of the extended art and things like that, but if there are 4 more Earth cards in your Banish Zone, Florian gets, if you would create 1 or more Aura tokens, instead create that many +1 of each of those tokens. So, in essence here, if you are to be creating any of the tokens such as Rune Chants or Embodiments of Earth, or whether it be Agility or Vigor or any of those things, right? These would be opportunities that you would get 2 of them, right? And that is really, really good to know in this sense. But what you really want to capitalize on in this deck is Rune Chant generation, because once this ability is turned on, anything that makes you 1 Rune Chant makes you 2 Rune Chants. And that's a lot more resources that your opponent has to run through in order for you to, finally get some physical damage through. This is the best part about Runeblade. Runeblades are really good about kind of mixing that might and magic. And so they come in with a physical attack, and it has a whole bunch of these small 1-ping Rune Chants on the back end, and it's really, really effective there. But before we get into the deck, wanted to say that it's a little difficult to get that ability online. And the reason it's difficult to get that ability online is because we don't have too much in regards to our Decompose cards, and all of our Earth cards that we run inside of our deck, for the most part, are Block 2 cards. Now, I might just not be the best at deck building, but let's go over the deck and kind of go over the strategy here. So with your headpiece, you have Helm of Lignum Vitae. This is essentially an Ironwrought Helm, but if you happen to get those 4 Earth cards into your Banish Zone, it Blade Breaks 2, which is pretty good. It blocks a little bit more, but you can at least still utilize it. Bloodtorn Bodice is mainly here to destroy any of your auras to get a free resource. This can be switched out with something like Blossom of Spring, but when you tie it in with cards like Arcane Cussing, it actually works out really, really well, because if you need something to be able to destroy an Arcane Cussing to get those 3 Rune Chants, then Bloodtorn Bodice is at least going to get you a free resource and then also destroy an aura for you. Next, We have Runehold Release. This is just a really good arm piece. Again, if Florian's ability is online, this creates 2 Rune Chant tokens instead of 1, so it's kind of like a Vexing Quill hand without the Arcane Barrier. So not too bad there. And then Ironhide Legs. You'll see that I'm not running Well Grounded, which is the Earth Legs. The reason I'm not running Well Grounded is because in order for you to even use the card, you need to have 4 or more Earth cards in your Banish Zone. If you don't, the card just sits there. And it's not as effective in an overall strategy of a game. At least in Ironhide Legs, you can block 2 additional if you're trying to block out breakpoints or anything like that. Benji is kind of a big thing here, as well as several other heroes that just kind of like to sneak some additional damage. So getting an Ironhide Legs is very good. You could probably switch it out with Ironrot Legs if you prefer to not pitch, but it's all up to your own standards. And then we are running the Nebula Blade. Again, the reason we're running Nebula Blade and not Rosetta Thorn is because a lot of what we do in this deck is just pitch for one big attack. There is not often times in which we are playing a non-attack action, playing an attack action with Go Again, and then attacking with Rosetta Thorn. That is not something that's happening, although it's a strategy that is very effective. Earth decks, especially an Earth deck that cares about decomposing, wants to use that Go Tall ability. So something like this is kind of in the better situation. So Nebula Blade, if you pay 2, it comes in for 1. Unless you played a non-attack action, then it comes in for 4. You'd prefer it to come in for 4. So if you have a blue and an Arcane Cussing in hand, you can pitch the blue, play with an Arcane Cussing, and then attack with a Nebula Blade for 4. On hit, create Rune Chant, and then on hit, destroy this, create 3 more Rune Chants. So that's pretty good value for them to want to block that. But that's specifically in those scenarios. Again, in most cases, you're not getting a lot of the Go-Agains. You could swap this out for something like Scepter of Pain if you're looking to just like slap on a little bit more arcane damage. But overall, Nebula Blade is probably going to be the better bet for you, because when your ability is turned online in Florian, you do get to go ahead and create 2 Rune Chants. So let's talk about what I mean by our ability turning online here. So we need to get 4 Earth cards into the Banish Zone, which means that we need to get 4 Earth cards into the grave and then also be able to play a Decompose card. So we've got Arcane Cussing here. These are the Runeblade cards. Arcane Cussing, you pay 1, Go Again, and then when you deal or dealt damage, you destroy it, and when it leaves the arena during your turn, you create 3 Rune Chant tokens. This is kind of like a boom grenade in a sense, right? Except it's a laid blast boom grenade, where you play this and then you swing a whole bunch, you swing for a lot of damage, and your opponent goes, well, I don't want you to make those, so I'm just going to block you out and then come in with damage on your turn. That gives you a little bit. And when you're coming in for like 8 to 10 damage, it's very hard to block it out and also still have a pretty amazing turn, unless you're another Guardian. So pretty good spot. But Arcane Cussing, we run the 2 reds. We run Rainbow of Blossoming Decay. This is one of our Decompose cards. So all this says here is that you pay 2, you come in for 5 damage, so it's a little off rate. It only blocks for 2, so it's even worse. And then you decompose. When this attacks, you may banish 2 Earth cards and an action card from your grave. If you do, you gain a life. You're going to want to decompose, because decomposing gets you life, and it also gets those cards into the Banish Zone that you need for your future plays. So when you take a look at something like this and you're just like, man, I don't know how I really feel about it. So the Decompose is kind of the big turning point here. Our other Decompose card is Cadaverous Tilling. Cadaverous Tilling is the casual 2-card 8 that everybody speaks about for the Reds, but it's still very difficult to pull off in Commoner, unfortunately. We are only running the reds and the yellows of this because the blues are just way off rate and not worth the time. But again, these Decompose cards only block for 2, which is kind of bad if you want to try and hold down the fort while you get those Earth cards in your graveyard to then swing those at your opponent. But let's talk a little bit about Bramble Spark. Bramble Spark is a very easy card to get off, right? It costs 0. You're probably already going to have an Earth card in your hand, maybe even, another attack or something of the sort. And you just go ahead, Bramble Spark, you fuse it, and then the next attack action you play this turn gains when you attack with it, you deal 1 arcane. And if it was fused, if Bramble Spark was fused, the next attack action card you play this turn gets +3. So you get +3 on your next attack. You can use that on Cadaverous Tilling. So if you have a Bramble Spark, a blue in hand, and a Cadaverous Tilling, you could Bramble Spark, fuse the Cadaverous Tilling with the Bramble Spark, and then pitch the blue, come in with a Cadaverous Tilling, decompose, and have it come in for 11 damage, +1 arcane, so 12 in a way. That's really, really valuable when it comes to something like this with that go tall strategy, because that's more than half the life of most heroes in Commoner. But you have to make sure that that lines up very well. So pitch stacking is a little important there. Consuming Volition, if you've dealt arcane damage this turn, this gets when this hits a hero, they discard a card. This kind of, again, is a force your opponent to interact with this or get disrupted by it. So Consuming Volition is a very, very good card. It blocks 3, it comes in for 4, it costs 1. So overall, you could even theoretically play an Arcane Cussing. You can then destroy your Bloodtone Bodice, destroy Cussing, get 3 Rune Chant tokens, come in with Consuming Volition, 4 with 3 Rune Chants on the back end. If they don't pitch 3, this has a Terrifying on it. If they do pitch 3, then it's just 4 damage. So it's still presenting a breakpoint. Deadwood Dirge, super good Runeblade card that came out of the set. This is a way you can destroy Arcane Cussing here to get the destruction effect and then also create the Rune Chants. So Arcane Cussing plus Deadwood Dirge is a serious like 6 Rune Chants off of 2 cards. It's like Cast Bones. The card's really, really good. I'm also playing Red Pummel. Again, we are kind of doing this go tall strategy, and Pummel is something that a lot of people don't quite expect in many decks. Guardians usually see stuff like Pummel, but you're not often seeing it in cases like, Runeblades or Wizards or things like that. So it is pretty good to see. You want to have some kind of contingency plan, because if you come in with a Consuming Volition and they're at 2 life and they block 3 to take 1, like, you want to have something. And unfortunately, Pummel doesn't work with Consuming Volition, but it does work with your Decay cards. It also works with Rites of Replenishment. It works with Fruits of the Forest. It works with Stir the Wildwood. So there are plenty of options available for you there. Next up, let's talk about Rites of Replenishment. You normally want those Earth cards in the Banish Zone, but in this case, you have a way to also get them back into your deck, and it blocks 3. So very valuable there. And this is, again, it's almost in a way where you have it as a contingency plan, but it's also just 6 damage. It's a 2 for 6, 3. This is like Command and Conquer level, like base on rate value stuff here. And then you get the Earth Fusion on top of it. So when you attack with it, if you dealt arcane damage, you can put a non-attack action card from your grave on the bottom of your deck. And then if you fused, you can put an attack action card from your grave on the bottom of your deck too. So that gets you 2 cards from the grave to the bottom of your deck, and it can be anything. It doesn't have to be Earth cards. So you have an opportunity to get back things like, Bramble Spark, and you can also get back, Pummel's not a non-attack action, but you can go ahead and get back Dirge. You can get back Arcane Cussing, any of those things. So it's not a bad choice. Sink Below, we don't want to get hurt. And again, we don't have that Rootbound Carapace. So without Rootbound Carapace, we want to make sure we have something for in case we try to get dominated. Spellblade Strike, this is pretty good. It's a 1 for 4, create a Rune Chant, but if your hero ability is online, it creates 2. So it also blocks for 3. Again, it's Consuming Volition stats. Very good. Stir the Wildwood is probably your key card here, especially if you can get it set up right. If you make a bunch of Rune Chants, you Stir the Wildwood, pay 2, come in, you fuse it, it gets +2. And then if you dealt arcane damage, it gets another +2. So this is a 2-card 9. It's technically a 3-card because you have to fuse here. So it's a 3-card 9, which is on rate-ish. But overall, it's a great ender. And especially if you can pummel it, if you have the ability to pummel this card, you're in for a good spot. So that'll be nice. Amplify the Arknights just in here, kind of have a blue. You can pay it for free if you have Rune Chants, so this can be a 0 for 4, block 3. but in most cases, you're probably just blocking with it, and it's a blue pitch, so you want that there too. Autumn's Touch, probably one of the best Earth cards in the game because it blocks 3 and is, you know, it's just a 3 for 5 on rate for these 3 for 7s kind of deal. So the fact it blocks for 3, though, is really the only reason we have it in here. Fruits of the Forest. I thought about running more of these, but again, I don't really think that we need a ton. This is just going to be a way for us to gain some life in case we need to, and also come in with a fairly okay attack. Again, it's got those same stats almost as Autumn Touch. It just doesn't block for 3. It might make a cut, or there might be some more added in there to get more Earth cards into the grave, but that is here nor there. Let's talk about Oath of the Arknight. That's got a reprint in the set. Oath of the Arknight got a reprint in Rosetta, and it is, again, it's there in case you want to create Rune Chants. If you have the resources for this, you can do that. But overall, you're probably not going to see a lot of play of it. It's probably just going to be pitched, and then it's going to be swung. This is at least also good to play into Nebula Blade. If you happen to have the resources for it, you can play this into Nebula Blade, and Nebula Blade will come in for 5. And you also create a Rune Chant when you play this, so it'll be 5 and then 1 Arcane. So that's at least some value there. And then Strength of 4 Seasons. I wanted to run the red. I don't know how I feel about running the red also, because the reason I like this card as a blue is because I know if I keep pitching it, when I get to my second cycle, I should have the ability to have my ability be online. But if my ability is not online, I can't do anything in that regard. This is just a 2 for 2 block 2. I can't do anything else in that regard. So these are going to be things I keep towards the end of the game and then, you know, worry about it later. But again, they only block 2. A lot of these Earth cards only block for 2. And I think that's where we're going to see some big upsets in regards to the deck. For our inventory here, I'm running Arcane Polarity and Oasis Respite. Arcane Polarity is because if you're going to go into a Runeblade matchup, if they ping you for any arcane damage, even if it's just 1, you can gain 4 life off of this. Not too bad. And you can also just gain 1 life in general, so it's also fine. Oasis Respite, we already know this is a prevent 4 damage. You're going to use this on heroes that have crush effects or heroes that are looking to do, crazy big, tall arcane damage, and you block out like Aether Flares with this. And then we run into the Crown of Dichotomy, which is just Arcane Barrier. This is for more defensive value in case you want more defense on your armor, and then more Arcane Barrier. So that's our kind of lineup here. It's tuned to the best of my ability, but I'm going to be honest, I think there are some things that could be changed. So if anybody in the comment section has anything that they wanted to talk over, right, let me know if there's something I'm missing, some kind of spicy tech. But I wanted to keep the deck thematic. I wanted it to be based around Florian's ability. But after you look at this, what you have to think about is the fact that Florian's ability cares about making tokens. And it's a hard mix to put in cards that care about creating tokens and also Earth cards and also Elemental Runeblade cards. There's a lot. And so, you know, Spellblade Strike's really good because it can make 2. Oath can make 2. Deadwood Dirge can make 4. Arcane Cussing can make 4. And outside of that, if the game isn't over at that point, then you've been caught in a fatigue stale match there. Well, let's go ahead and hop into a game. Let's see how we fared with this deck and just kind of play along with the concept and see how he really performs in the actual format itself. All right, so our first match here is into Olympia. Olympia's had some pretty good standings as far as Commoner has gone, so I wanted to see kind of where we're looking at with this deck. They might be running axes, they might be running the Great Axe, which looks like they are. They're running the Decimator Great Axe build here. And all my whole goal is here is just to, again, get cards into the graveyard and make sure that I'm able to decompose. My issue going against a deck like this, though, is that my cards already only block for 2 in most cases. So with Decimator Great Axe coming in and being able to have the defense value of a card, the first card that defends it, it is rougher for me that this happens. So my whole goal here, I only have 1 Earth card in my hand and I want to get it into the grave. This will hopefully go ahead and net me some good stuff here. This is going to block down to 4, and that'll full block this out. It's turn 1, so I'm not expecting anything crazy there. So I go ahead and get into my turn here. Blossoming Decay isn't going to do me anything here, because Blossoming Decay, unfortunately, is just not the card you want to see. Now, if I had blocked with my Helmet in order for me to get another Earth card into the grave, then it would have been a little bit better. I could have started decaying here, or could have started decomposing here, sorry. But instead, I'm just going to come in with a Wildwood and fuse it. So this is just simple 7 coming in, right? Good break point, trying to present some damage. I'm going to probably put the Sink Below into the arsenal, and then that way I'll have more cards to put into my grave later when my opponent blocks with or when my opponent attacks with all these things, right? When they attack with Decimator Great Axe, I hope to draw into more Earth cards that I can just throw into that axe. And then when my Blossoming Decay comes up, I'm in a good spot. So we've got a Bramble Spark here and a Strength of the 4 Seasons. Now, there's also an Agility up for the good Decimator Great Axe. And again, I'm not really sure how I feel about this, because Decimator Great Axe doesn't allow you to attack twice with it. So I believe a lot of these pumps are mainly for the damage and not for the agility. But here comes 7 damage, and then of course it's going to have some stuff here. So all of my Runeblade stuff, for the most part, blocks for 2, which is my Earth cards block for 2 and my Runeblade cards block for 2. So there's not really a way for me to make it a super defensive deck and also still have a sheer amount of value. Now here, what I did instead is I saw the Great Axe had go again and immediately went, well, they could follow up that with another attack, but they didn't. And because they didn't, I don't have another Earth card in my Banish Zone. So I don't actually even get to utilize anything here. This is just 7 damage coming in, but it's 7 damage after a Bramble Spark. So that's 1 Arcane and then 7 more damage. We're kind of just trading blows here in regards to our game plan. But what is happening is I'm still not quite getting the cards I need in order for me to decompose. If Florian's ability is not online in a fast enough time, then the rest of the cards in my deck are just kind of okay. They're so much better when his ability's online, but they're just kind of okay prior. So now they've got a 2-card hand. They're going to come in a comfortable 7 with that Sharpened Steel. So again, 7 Decimator Great Axe is just kind of the best way to play this, because it's a breakpoint and it also halves the defense of the first card defending it. So it makes it even harder to block out the card itself. So I take 2 damage there. In this situation, I don't really know what I want to do, because I have an Arcane Cussing and I have a Spellburied Strike. I can't quite play everything, so I'm just going to come in with a Nebula Blade for 1. Now, what I could have done here is if I had the Rotwood Reaper, I could have played the Runehold Release to get a Rune Chant, and then I could have come in with a Rotwood Reaper for 4. That's a little bit of a better turn, but I did still want to make sure they gave up some kind of defensive value for blocking out my equipment. Now here we run into the good old wonderful all red hands in most cases besides my blue, and my blue is the only thing in my hand that blocks for 3. So if my opponent comes in with a really big attack, my hand doesn't really block well. So it's either don't block anything and try to come in with a decomposed cadaverous tilling with, you know, some kind of additional value in the backside of it, and then maybe Arsenal the Pummel, or just block out here to get more Earth cards into the grave and wait for them to kind of run out of gas. But what they do here is they play a Felling Swing red into a Felling Swing blue, and now this Decimator Great Axe is coming in for 14. I cannot just take this. Like, this is way, way, way too much damage. But I also feel like taking it is poor on my end. Like, just if I'm able to just get these cards into the grave and just survive a little bit longer, they should run out of gas, right? When they start running out of reds and they only have blues left in the deck, that's when, you know, Warrior tends to have a failing there. But Decimator Great Axe still only needs a blue in order for it to attack. So I take a little bit of damage there, fall down to 10. And at this point, it's just simply, what are we doing over all of this, right? Is this going to be another grueling game of me putting a bunch of Earth cards into my graveyard and then never being able to banish them? So here we go. Again, Stir the Wildwood and Rites of Replenishment. They're elemental Runeblade cards, but they're not decompose cards. So I'm left with another hand of not being able to decompose. If I had not blocked any of that Decimator Great Axe damage, I could have decomposed at least 2 Earth cards. But in our situation here, we don't really have that. So this is just coming in for 5. Again, we have some 3 blocks this time around, so at least feel a little bit better about it. But it's not going to be enough to be able to swing back anything crazy here. So Rites comes in, blocks for 2 afterwards. They play the Iron Song response to pump it to 8. And lo and behold, right, that's 6 more damage taken to myself, and I'm out at 16 to 4. So it's not looking good for me here, and I'm trying my best to make sure that I have something available to swing back with. And in this case, I kind of do actually, because I can play my Arcane Cussing, and then I can just go ahead and swing in for 7 with a bunch of Rune Chants on the back end of it, because what I can do here is destroy that Arcane Cussing with my Bodice, create 3 Rune Chants, and get a 3rd resource. Free floating. Shout out to them. And then we play the Stir the Wildwood. If they pitch a blue to block out the Rune Chants, this just comes in for 5. But if they take it all, because they're at 16, a pretty comfortable life total, this comes in for 7. Even if they take 1, this comes in for 7. So we have to see whether or not we're going to be able to strip more cards from our opponent's hand to kind of give them a bit of a weaker turn. So that way we're not as affected by it. They are taking the arcane damage here, so Stir is going to come in for 7 damage, but I don't think Olympia really cares at this point. At 4 life, I'm kind of struggling. I have no cards in Banish because I just cannot seem to get this to fire off. The damage potential in Commoner with a lot of heroes is really high. And when most of the cards in your deck block for 2, and they're the cards that you need to have in your deck, and they block for 2, it doesn't really turn out very well for you here. It would be different if there was more of an embodiment of Earth build for Florian, but there really isn't. There's not a way to be super defensive in Commoner in Earth heroes, because the only thing we have is Sigil of Earth. Sigil of Earth is the only thing that we have, and that only makes us 1 embodiment of Earth token, and it doesn't make any of these attack actions get +1 defense value. It makes non-attack actions get +1 defense value. So my opponent pops a deep blue. They use that 3 resources, play a Felling Swing, and this Decimator Great Axe gets to come in for 9. And at this point, I want to keep a Blossoming Decay in hand, but I have to block here because I die. I die otherwise. This will bring it down to 4, and then I'll end up having to block more. I can throw another card on top of it and then just arsenal the Blossoming Decay. But I want to block out absolutely as much as possible here. So it's going to come in. It's going to try and deal. We're blocking for 6. We're going to go ahead and use our Ironhide legs here. Block for 1 more. And then we're just going to take 1 damage. We're going to try and kind of get these Felling Swings out of the way, but there it is. The Iron Song response wins them the game, and we lose. So hopefully that gave you some insight. There are a lot of decks out there that are very, very effective at pushing these high numbers of damage. And this is the part now in the video where I give my honest opinion of the hero and how I feel. Florian has a lot of potential. There's a lot of ways I'm sure you can build Florian. But if you build him as a Runeblade, then you miss out on the Earth stuff. And if you miss out on the Earth stuff, you might as well play Viserai. Then, if you build them Earth and none of the Runeblade stuff, you might as well be playing Oldhim or Terra, because all it does is high damage potential for the cards and then nothing else. It's a higher damage potential and a higher ceiling, but you're not making any tokens. Unfortunately, without any things like Rootbound Carapace, without things that make Embodiment of Earth, without different cards that make a bunch of other tokens that might be more effective, there's just no way for you to play this hero in a way that is just as effective as if you were playing any other Runeblade. It's weird to think that all of the new Runeblade effects in cards that came out are super good, right? Runeblade got a lot of stuff for Commoner, and that's super awesome. But Earth didn't. And Decompose, while it's easier to do in a 40 health format, in a 20 health format, when you have to almost prioritize blocking over attacking, because you're one of two people, right? You're either throwing everything to the wall and never blocking, or you're only blocking, waiting for them to run out of gas, and attacking with your weapon. That is the only thing in Commoner that is crazy effective, at least from my own standpoint, is that you have to be either consistent in your damage, or you need to be able to effectively block everything out and then come in with a measly amount of damage, something that your opponent will still have to respect, especially later on in the game. And unfortunately, with Florian, you're kind of stuck in this weird middle ground where you want to be mid-range, but you can't quite be mid-range because your Earth cards don't block well. Your Elemental Runeblade cards need to have an Earth card to fuse. You need to have cards that generate rune chants that often will not be able to generate the Florian amount of rune chants. And at that point, what is the reason you're playing Florian, right? Is it just because you want to cadaverous tilling and get some big stuff out there? There needs to be some kind of payoff for the hero. And I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing it. Maybe somebody else out there is seeing it. I thought about doing, again, a kind of an OTK build where you build up a whole bunch of rune chants and then you go ahead and fire them off. And theoretically, you can do that in Florian. It just would make more sense for you to play Viserai or Vincent over Florian in that regard, because you get more payoff from having those rune chants there and playing Runeblade cards than you do in Florian. Florian needs to have Decompose cards in his deck and then also Earth cards. So if you don't have enough Earth cards to decompose when you are able to then play those Decompose cards, it ends up not really working out to the best of your ability. But regardless, I'm not the best deck builder, and I know that. So please, by all means, if you guys have any kind of criticisms or comments, or maybe you have a different way in which you're playing Florian that you would like to see shown here on the channel, let me know. I'll gladly go ahead and check it out, because I think it's going to be a very interesting hero as we move forward. But I just don't think that Florian, as their thematic hero ability is concerned with, cares enough about doing that. They don't care enough about decomposing and then making the rune chants, because in a 20 life format, you have to be able to do that defensively. And that's where Rootbound Carapace comes in. So I think the biggest downfall is that Rootbound Carapace is not a common. If it becomes a common sometime in the future, awesome, right? We're in a good spot. It can go ahead and pop right into the list, and this deck changes entirely. I mean, seriously, entirely it changes. But until we get something like Rootbound Carapace in Commoner, Florian is just not super great in my own personal opinion. But again, let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. I'll be more than happy to chit chat with you about our little elemental Runeblade boy here. But while you're down there putting in that comment, make sure to go ahead and like the video by hitting that like button down there. Go ahead and give it a little smooch. And then go ahead and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you guys enjoy Commoner content, I've got plenty of it. So do make sure to go ahead and subscribe if you haven't already. And then if you really wanted to, you can support the channel by becoming a channel member. Channel members do get access to our podcast, The Common Language, earlier than everybody else does. I think I'm changing that to be about a week earlier than everybody else does. So you're in a good spot there if you want to get that content earlier. But it'll come out a week later afterwards, so don't worry about it. If you don't want to become a channel member, that's totally fine. Up to you. It helps support the channel and keeps the lights on over at my place, so I certainly appreciate it. But regardless, thank you for watching today's video on the Florian deck tech for Commoner, and I hope you continue having fun in the flesh and blood. And I will see all of your wonderful faces in our next video.